When the light's on, you're live. One, two. Check two. 1, 2.
Test 1, 2, check 1, 2, 2.
Good morning, Bill. This is a test. This is a test. Microphone check. 3, 4, 5. Microphone check. This is microphone number 4.
One, two. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
There you are. Yep. Yep, a little bit of an echo.
Yeah, because it's all here. And your mic is on. Right?
One, two.
two.
Okay. Are we sure? Yeah. All right. Um, But our first order of business is, good morning, everyone, to begin with.
Morning.
Our first order of business is our Audit and Finance Committee, so do we really need to sing a tune or something until Steve gets on the phone? He's got to call that to order. Well, we certainly have a quorum, and I hate to start without the chair.
I'm here.
You're here? He's here.
I'm here.
Good
I've been
morning,
waiting-
Steve.
I'm waiting for someone to let me in.
Okay, we're going to crank you up a little bit, I think.
How's that?
Hit-
We're good?
We're good now. Thank
We're
you
good.
so much.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Steve.
call to order the Audit and Finance Committee meeting. Again, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well and staying safe. So the purpose of today's Audit and Finance, we have actually 4 items to discuss. We're to review the draft of the 2021 ASM operations budget, the 2021 ACCA budget, draft of the 2019 through 2024 ABO budget submission, and then finally after that the audit engagement letter. So if you go to tab 2, you'll find draft of the 2021 ASM budget, and I guess I'll refer to Lynn for that, or to ASM.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
As noted, these documents kind of feed into each other. The ASM budget is a separate document. You have the full document that breaks things down by the various departments and months, types of events, etc. in your book. I'll just focus on the first couple of pages, which are really the summary pages, and those are the ones that feed into the overall budget that we'll be looking at in a few moments. I think today you're going to hear the word conservative a few times from me. Obviously, this being the end of September and not even really being 3/4 of the way through 2020, which has been probably a mild word, unusual, and trying to predict next year with still a lot of these unusual factors involved, and trying to stay conservative, trying to reach out to the various partners such as Discover Albany and I know ASM using their long-term, wide-ranging experience and speaking to other venues and trying to get a flavor for what's going to be happening over the next several months to a year. So all of that factored into here, and I give you that background so you realize the amount of time and effort that went into this budget. I want to thank ASM. I know Doug is here right now, but their financial team really worked very diligently on this budget. In looking at the budget, and as I mentioned, kind of there's a summary page, but a couple pages in, you'll see the what's called the lead income statement monthly. I did just want to touch on that. I think it's page 3 or 4. I'm sorry, I'm holding down the button and trying to turn pages. You'll note by month that January really no events are considered at this point in time. Obviously, we are subject to change on all of this, quite frankly. But if you go from January through December, what you start to see is a rebuilding. I think that's the key here, and Doug may even want to jump in here, but this budget was put together with the idea that we're almost going back to square one in certain respects. I see a lot of nodding here, our chairperson's nodding vigorously. So we really did focus on cost containment as much as possible. However, that being said, there's certain costs that are built into this budget that are really critical for us to regrow this business. This still puts in the leadership team. It still has our sales force, marketing, and so forth. And I think those items, hopefully you'll all agree, are critical in order to get through this very challenging time. So as I mentioned, I just wanted to point out that January through December layout showing that slowly but surely, it starts to build back up. As is typical for this area, in the summer months, you actually see a little bit of a backtrack, but that's more related to that time frame here locally for the types of events that the center would hold. But as you can see, overall, we're rebuilding. We're not anticipating 2021, though, to get back to what we were calling normal, even during 2021. We feel it's going to take a bit of time to get there. So it's really, like I said, based on their idea of events, what they're seeing, some of the bookings that they're starting to see, and so forth. So I don't think I need to go into any of the specific line items. I feel like that kind of covers things in general, and as I mentioned, still having the appropriate sales and marketing teams in place working so diligently to get us back to normal, along with, all of the things that, whether there's people in the building or not, have to occur. There's certain maintenance, certain cleaning, some levels of security, so on and so forth, insurance. All of those things are built into this. So with that, are there any specific questions on the ASM budget before I go into the overall budget?
Anyone? I think we can move forward.
Okay, so the other piece, which is, I believe, tab 3, correct, tab 3 in your books, is the overall budget. The budget that I was just discussing, the ASM budget, figures into this more as a line item, about toward a half of the page there, line 7,000. So that's where the ASM portion of the budget fits. For the overall budget, again, conservative, really taking a hard look at cost containment as much as possible. I feel it's a very lean and efficient budget. And for the most part, it's pretty consistent to 2020. The good news is all along we've had an eye on cost containment and making sure we run a lean, efficient machine, so to speak. The one item, obviously, that's a key factor for this budget, though, that I want to spend a minute on, is the hotel occupancy tax, which is the top line there. So after consultation with some of the gurus in the industry, such as Discover Albany, and using their tools, seeing what has been happening currently, projections, I know they'll probably get into more detail about some of that aspect in the regular meeting, but I refer people back to some of the presentations over the past number of meetings where they have a lot of industry-wide tools in consultation with them. We are budgeting at 50%, which, if you recall, has been what we've been budgeting at for a couple months now, and will be doing so through the end of the year. Our actual currently is running just about 50%. As we heard at the last meeting, it's expected that that's going to continue into the future. I would much rather be presenting a budget that is conservative and based on what we see, and continuing with these challenging times, and then be able to report to you that we're seeing above that figures coming in. And I don't want to be in a position where I then have to go the opposite way. So we felt like this was a good approach to take. We do feel it's conservative. Obviously, we can't truly predict the future, but I think what we're seeing is some of that hopeful start of a recovery in 2021, but it's going to be really lagging in this particular industry that generates this occupancy tax money.
Lynn, could I just interject? The 50% is on the amount itself. It's not, well, somewhat related, but it's not really related to occupancy percentage itself. It's just the amount that has been collected. And to remind everyone, that is our major source of funding.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is, to reiterate that point, that really is the ability to run the operations in many respects, and that's a really key factor. It always has been, but in these changing times, and, you know, as I just discussed with the ASM side of things, it really is going back and starting to rebuild, and we know how important that hot money was during that process. And it also helps enable us to keep this building fresh, exciting, new. I think that's going to be, at least in, I guess, my personal opinion, that's going to be a real key for this rebuilding process as people do start to rebook events or look for venues that can address their concerns. It's going to be absolutely necessary for us to ensure that they feel good coming into this building and that it's appropriately maintained, secure, all the precautions are in place, and you know, a lot of those things are dollars that have to go into all of that behind the scenes. So certainly the HOT is very critical. Again, all the way down in between that top line of the occupancy tax and down most of the way, that's actually relatively status quo with the exception of the ASM line I mentioned before, 7,000, which feeds from that other document. And then toward the bottom, what you'll see is the capital improvements and reserve. These are things that are typically included in the budget. We do still have required reserves that we need to do our best to maintain at all possible. This year it's 300,000 that we did put in there. It's a operator.
Question. It's Joe. I have a question. Required reserves, required by whom and why?
It's required through the operator agreement, and their reserves for capital improvements and larger maintenance items and things of that nature.
There's no room on those reserves. They are a fixed percentage, a fixed amount. What is it?
Joe, the amount is fixed in the contract at $1 million in terms of the emergency reserve. The capital improvement is an estimate based upon a building of this size and what percentage needs to be spent each year, what percentage needs to be maintained. Roughly, you anticipate somewhere between 2 to 3% of value on a 5-year basis.
Thank you.
Also, and that reserve, we did not begin that reserve when we first opened. Didn't we wait till somewhere into the second year or after that before we began the reserves?
We established a minimum reserve at the start. The minimum was 500,000. The maximum is 1 million. We established a reserve at about 250,000 with agreement at that time with SMG, now ASM. And you're correct. It wasn't until the end of 2017, early part of 2018, that we were able to get it to the $500,000 minimum point. And then over the last 2 years, we've built it up to the $1 million.
Thank you. Yeah.
One thing I would add is this budget does not contemplate using the reserves. In carrying a number that we believe to be conservative for hotel tax at 50% of the original budgeted amount for 2020, which was based on the estimate per point in 2019 carried forward. The belief is we will not have to touch reserves to get through the process of keeping this open through 2021, even given the very reduced amount of event income that's being projected by ASM in their budget.
Yes, and additionally to that, so we have that reserve line, but then you will note there's the section for potential capital improvements. We felt that it was important to include notice of capital improvements that we expect will be needed during 2021. If you notice, going through the months there, there's nothing listed until August of 21. But I also want to caution people that, again, this is a budget. I mean, that August 2021 is almost a year from now. So certainly if things change for the positive or go and stay very challenging, those items can be reviewed and potentially deferred if absolutely necessary. However, these items stem from discussions with the operator, ASM, and again, going back to an emphasis on making sure that this venue stays competitive, it stays on the top of people's minds when they're booking events, and that the quality of the experience here is going to remain top-notch. And, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of competitors, so to speak, as things ramp back up, because a lot of venues have been closed, and similar to where we're at, you know, there's people that are really going to want to fight for business, so it's going to be critical for us to maintain things. If you look at the descriptions on the far right, these are really oriented to that. Improving parking efficiency, making sure that the high contact surfaces are properly maintained, and so on and so forth. So we did feel that as we do rebuild, we wanted to make sure that we keep these items on the plate. Are there? Oh.
I have one more. I have a question or a comment. Back to the hot, and Michelle made a good point with the 50% being of the dollars. Do we have a projection? Is there a projection of what the actual occupancy is going to be for 2020 as far as percentage?
No, you'll notice on the notes over on the right that it says estimated based on STR, which was Smith Travel Research information, and I know it's Discover Albany had a special report and survey done. So we've been advised of numbers. I don't know that we've been advised of an overall rate. I'm looking at Mike Hoffman, and he's shaking no as well. So I don't know. I mean, we swing so much during the year that it's difficult, and I think once we get into 2021, we'll begin to get a sense. For example, first quarter in Albany has always been strong because of the legislature, but we're not sure, you know, what that's going to look like in 2021. So there are a lot of variables. So I believe, and I think we should look into that, Duncan, if STR provided more than just kind of the whole number, and if they came up with some kind of occupancy estimate as well.
My understanding is that the Visitors Bureau will be sharing the report with us at some point. They're in the process of reviewing it now, but we use their assumptions as the basis of our assumptions for the amount of hot that we're going to receive.
Okay.
I would add, and Star knows better than I do, but there's a couple issues going on. One is you talk about occupancy, but the other one is rate. And, when the occupancy is low, the hotel rates are less. So, and occupancy is very low. So, it's kind of a double whammy. Until you start to get business, you can't push rates. So it'd be interesting to see exactly what Star says, but my gut tells me that, occupancy, we're kind of headed into a slower season, and rates are softer than they normally are at every hotel, and I see it on my weekly Star reports that we look at and analyze every day. But I think everything you said is exactly right. I think you're being conservative is correct. I think everything you said is exactly right. You got to keep this place looking beautiful and fresh. We're judged every day by our customers. How is your COVID protocols? Are you all wearing a mask? You're how clean are you? You're sanitizing. And the minute you cheat, every customer, we read it in the comments. If somebody has a mask on, it's not covering their nose, we hear about it. So I think you're exactly right with what you said.
Steve, if I could too, I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to realize that throughout the year then, we're going to be looking at this budget over and over again to perhaps make adjustments as we get a better feeling for the landscape and kind of know where we are. So I think as audit and finance, we need to be prepared for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, we look at it very diligently each month. You may not all hear or see the background, but for example, Duncan and I often have communications each time we get a report and really look at the future and have those communications about, potential reserves and things of that nature. That's why we feel, I think, comfortable, and Duncan may jump in here if he wants to, but we feel comfortable getting through the end of this year, as I've mentioned before, and I feel like 2021 is going to be tight and certainly challenging. But again, I'm more hopeful that ultimately we have more positive news as we see things, for example, a vaccine, or where people kind of get more and more used to the new norm and get a little more used to maybe getting out. But at the same time, I think we factored in, I know ASM factored in smaller events, all of that factors in. I do recall, it wouldn't specifically answer the question, but I do recall from the STR report, I think at our last meeting, that they expect occupancy will not be back to what we called normal until 2023, and room rates, I believe, were 2025 even, if I recall.
That's correct, yes. That's correct. But I think just for this board that it's important for us to realize that we may be doing and more communicating, Steve, also between meetings, since we only meet quarterly, to keep everyone advised.
Yeah, because it's in a lot of ways that we're still into a real guessing game here, and
in every way.
Yeah, yeah. And it depends on who you listen to. So somebody's right, somebody's wrong, it's a lot of wishful thinking too. But, oh well.
A blended comment in response. We have taken what is an accrual budget and we've turned it into a cash flow analysis. So every 2 to 3 weeks, working with Amy Thompson and with Lynn Zaranda of BST CFO, we develop a cash flow analysis of where we are. That's why, for instance, during this year, when it was very apparent that event revenue was changing very quickly, hotel tax could not be counted upon on the budget amount, we eliminated things from the planned capital improvement list. We cut it in half. And then for the year going forward, we essentially are looking at a half of the investment we would normally make. On an average, it's somewhere around $500,000 a year in a building of this size, and then periodically every 3 to 5 years it jumps up to almost $1 million. Again, based on that 1 to 2 to 3% of total value. So what we've done is look at this on a cash flow basis every 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that where we are, we get a cash flow analysis from ASM, which is different than this accrual budget. And that's how we've been able to maintain the reserves that we have, spend within the money that we have, work within the limits of the resources that we anticipate.
Are there any other questions or comments or things that you'd like me to go into a little further?
I think we move on to the ABO budget submission.
All righty. So that is tab 4 in your books, if you have a book. Essentially, this is a required format for the ABO under the Public Authorities Act reporting requirements. And I always like to point out that it really is a budget. A lot of, a budget is technically an estimate. This particular report asks you to go out a number of years. So you will see that they require us to do some level of thinking about 2024. So before, when I mentioned even 2021 being a difficult budget process in our minds because of all of these unknown external factors, as you can imagine, 2022, 3, and 4 really are just based on 2021 and the knowledge we have today. A lot of it is very similar to past years. The couple highlights, as we just discussed, the municipal subsidies grants, which is where the hotel occupancy tax line goes in. We continued through 2022 at the 50% collection rate. And then in 2023 and 4, we did go back to what historically had been a full anticipated amount. That's by no means indicating that that will truly happen, but we're certainly very hopeful. Again, this is a conservative budget, so we tried to continue to be conservative into 2022 and get more optimistic in 2023 and 2024. Hopefully to make people smile, when Duncan and I were working on this, I said I did want a magic ball in our capital items because that's what I felt I really kind of wished I had. And then, there's notes at the bottom. You have to report the actual from 2019, the estimated from 2020. So some of those notes just point out lines, for example, with the professional services contracts. We had increased costs for primarily legal fees up until we really got rid of e-com and all of that. So that's why you see some lower figures there in 2021 through 2024. And the capital asset outlay line for 2021, that $538,000 ties to the budget that we just went over. But we have historically and continued not budgeting such items for the outer years because you really, there's no way to truly predict which items, amounts, cost estimates, and things of that nature. And this is a guideline. Obviously, it's subject to change considerably in those outer years. So again, we go conservative. The last line, the other non-operating expenditures, I'm sure you probably all realize, but in case you don't, that's why we have the huge amount in 2019 is really related to e-com and the transfer of the land that happened right at the end of 2019. So that's why you don't see anything in those outer years. The little bit in 2020 was just that true-up process. So this is the document that upon ultimate approval will be posted by September 30th to meet compliance requirements with the ABO. Any questions?
from here. Nope. I guess not.
Great. Thank you.
So we move on to tab 5, the audit engagement letter. Do you want to speak on this, Duncan, or?
I'd be glad to. UHY is still within the time frame of the first auditor, Alex Zhang. So there'll be no change in personnel this year. Every 5 years it has to change. And we're in the 4th year, I think, with Mr. Zhang. So this is presented by UHY. It's actually a reduction in cost estimate than it was for last year, partly because ECOM has been resolved. The litigation is off the table. There are a number of things that they had to deal with in 20 that they will not have to deal with in 21. So after speaking with Mr. Kearns and Mr. Zhang, it would be a recommendation of staff that this letter be accepted.
And you'll find those terms on page 5 of their proposal letter.
Right.
So also the time frame of when they'll begin work, which is great, beginning of January.
Yeah, and they expect it to be done no later than March 31st?
That's
Correct.
They've committed to that in the past, and we've met that schedule every year. They intend to do it again this year as well.
They're just not quite sure about the hours. That's for the, as you see, the range almost 15,000 and could be as high as 17,500. So.
That's always been a concern, Steve. It's consistent with their presentation in the past. What we do is by meeting with ASM in advance and by getting a detailed worksheet from UHY in advance, we try to have everything ready for them. I think that's part of the reason we've seen a significant reduction in hours over the estimate for the audit of 2020 versus this audit, for 2019, performed in 2020, as opposed to this estimate for 2020, because we have everything ready. Having those worksheets in advance, sharing them with Lynn and with Amy, Doug McLean and his team seems to be a pretty efficient way to reduce some of the professional hours.
So it's really us. Their estimate is based on not knowing how quickly or how efficiently we're going to provide them the information they need.
That's correct. Correct, and I don't want to say it's boilerplate, but I mean, I think you see that with a lot of proposals.
Yes, this is very common for firms. I think a little bit of it is them making sure they have a range in the event that a client doesn't necessarily provide the detailed information. I'm pretty particular about making sure as much support is done in-house and provided to auditors, but also I think all auditors build in if there is what I'll call unexpected new requirement, or the audit requirements change more than people probably think they do, but if there's an unusual event, if there's a catastrophic type of event that happens to a client, something like that, they need to just make sure that they've built in time to assess how that may or may not impact the audit.
So on that note, do we need a motion to recommend approval of these in the regular meeting?
I'll move it.
Do we need that, Bob?
I was asking Rob, I think. Is Rob there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we need,
Yeah, we should do one resolution to recommend all 3 budgets, and then one resolution to recommend the audit engagement.
okay. So I'll
I move the engagement letter.
A second? That was Michael?
I'll second.
All approved? We need a roll call?
No roll call.
Yeah, it was the engagement letter resolution.
Okay.
Another motion for the budgets?
No, motion for the 3 budgets? To recommend approval of the 3 budgets?
It's Megan. I'll make a motion.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
Second. And all approved. Okay.
All right.
Any other business? I'll take a motion to adjourn audit and finance.
So moved.
And a second.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Onward. First of all, thank you all for making the effort to be here this morning. I think you can see that our staff here has witnessed by this facility and this setup and what's going on downstairs that, thank you. I think we got what we can do under control, and that looks great. So
Madam
thank you.
Chair, I have one complaint.
Yeah.
Coffee's a tad weak.
You like yours light. You like it light, but not that light.
The things I could say now. So thank you all for being here. And Steve, I assume you're still on the phone?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Can we move forward, please, to item number 2? And hopefully you've all taken a gander at the July 30th meeting minutes. And can I take motions and then any discussion? Motion?
I'd make the motion with the correction that at least both Assembly Member McDonald and I were present for that meeting, but via phone.
It's on there, I think.
We're mentioned as we entered.
Yeah, we're listed as absent, though, at the top
Oh.
for a correction.
Okay, I don't know what the Roberts Rules says about that.
My understanding was, I'll defer to Bob, my understanding was when the meeting starts, if you're not present, you're listed as absent, and you're supposed to be added as soon as you join. I apologize, Sarah, I didn't mean to imply that you weren't participating. You were there, but I clocked in at a few minutes after 9, and we had begun sharply at 9. But I can make a notation, whatever you would prefer.
I think this is Bob's call.
Yes, in order to avoid any sort of confusion, it should just be the members present at the start of the meeting.
Physically present.
Right, and then when members enter during the meeting, it's noted throughout the minutes, but it shouldn't actually say absent because it appears to be absent for the entire meeting. So we should
Okay,
just
so it
not
should
have
be
a
not
line.
present.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll make that change.
And then one other item is, since Sarah and John were present, they can act on the minutes. I believe, Mike, you were not present, so you would abstain from the vote on this minute.
So I'll move it with that change.
Okay.
And since I followed her into the meeting, I'll follow her with a second.
Any further discussion on the minutes? Can we have a vote, please? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Just as noted by council.
Okay. Let's move on then, please, to the treasurer's report. And Steve, you want to
Yeah.
bring that up? And
Sure, and we'll bring this right to Lynn because she does it so eloquently.
well, okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
thank you.
I was looking ahead.
In tab 3 of your, now we're in your packet for the regular meeting. Tab 3 has the financials. Interestingly enough, for August, if we start with the statement of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position, if you look at the middle of the page, the center itself, while revenue remained obviously quite a bit lower than expected, the bottom line was the loss that we had budgeted was higher than our actual loss for August. I do emphasize for August. That's a combination of lower revenue, but obviously lower event expenses and cost containment. That being said, though, going to the right there and looking at year-to-date, our loss in the middle there is considerably higher than we budgeted, and I'm presuming that's not really a surprise to anyone. So unless there's specific questions on that, the occupancy tax, which is line 4100, we, for the year, are at about 56% of our budget, but more recently, we're closer to 50%, as you see, like in the August column. Right now, for this particular set of August financials, we're still estimated for the most recent quarter. Just as a reminder, the quarters are not calendar quarters, so what we're seeing is June through August, which is still fully estimated at this point in time. Other than that, things are running as expected from the operational side of things for the authority side. Any questions on the revenues, expenses? Moving to the statement of net position, again, things are running as typical with respect to the net position. Line 1150, the occupancy tax, as I just mentioned, that $621,000 that you see there is still an estimate for the June through August quarter. We do expect that will be close to actual. We certainly hope that it will be close to actual, but again, we try to communicate pretty regularly with what Discover Albany is seeing and kind of putting our feelers out. Other than that, I've mentioned it before and I'll reiterate it again today. From a cash position and a reserve position, we are comfortable despite these abnormal situations through, again, the end of this year and even into early next year without tapping reserves. And, there's a lot of credit for ASM and Duncan as the leader on the authority side and really making sure that every cost is scrutinized very thoroughly. Any questions? Thank you.
We're good? Thank you, Lynn.
Okay, next then, Steve or me, we have the three budget budget items to vote on, and then the audit.
Tab 4.
I think that would be you, Michelle, at this point, right?
Let me just note that the Audit and Finance Committee just met and have moved to the full board the adoption of the Albany Capital Center ASM budget, adoption of the ACCA budget, and also the adoption of the budget that has to be presented to the authority's budget office, the ABO. You have each one of these separately, right, Rob?
Yeah, that's correct. For this vote, it'd have to be each one separate.
Okay. All right, then. Adoption of the Capital Center ASM budget. Is there any further discussion before we take?
Motion.
John, thank you. Second?
A second.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is the adoption of the ACCA budget.
I'll make a motion on that.
Steve, thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Michael. All in favor?
Aye.
Third is the adoption of the ABO budget from 2021 to 24. Motion, please.
Make a motion, it's Megan.
Thank you, Megan. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
And then we have the engagement for the annual audit.
So moved.
So moved to, I heard that. Sarah? Thank you. Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and thank you, Steve, for joining us, and stick with us. We've got a few other things to talk about as well. Are you providing that this morning? Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I just want to go back. I've been saying this saying for a while now to a lot of my clients, and Lynn brought it up. I'll keep saying we've ordered a crystal ball on Amazon, and it just hasn't shipped yet. So I use that on a daily basis. But all right, let's get into it, guys. Definitely have some updates for you for 2020 and 2021. I am very happy to present that we have been successful in booking 7 events over the last 2 months. As you can see, the type of events and the total number of people aren't exactly what we're used to, but it's a small step and it's a great step. And I think it shows that people are finally, slowly getting to get used to this new event normal and at least testing the waters a little bit. As I go into the rest of the information, currently we have had a total of 97 events cancel off of our 2021 or 2020 calendar. 7 of those events represent people who had contracts and then decided not to move forward, basically due to COVID-19. There's a split of all the different types of events that have canceled and their totals, and that has totaled 164 days in our calendar lost. The next bullet point, I think, is also an important one. We've seen definitely another surge of cancellation over this last 2 months. Kind of calmed down a little bit, kind of June and July, people were still trying to hang on there and figure out what was going to go on. But over the last 2 months, we've really seen an uptick of some more cancellations based on 7 events that successfully rescheduled in our calendar from earlier in the year to the fourth quarter. Only 1 of them is hanging on. They're in November and still trying to figure out if they're going to move forward. But all other 6 events have postponed and rescheduled again to 2021. There are 2 events left that currently know their events are not taking place in 2020, but they're trying to figure out whether they're going to postpone or just sort of call it quits, to say the least. So that brings our total for 2020 to 56 events, 81 event days, 20,680 clients to walk through our door, and 2,396 hotel rooms for the year. We do have an additional 2 contracts that have been issued. But if we really take a look at a comparison to where we were today last year, we're at about 1/4 of what we're used to seeing business-wise. So I think that number is very telling in itself as well. My conversations with clients now consist of, you really need to have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. And that's really, putting our clients on the therapy couch almost is, I think, what Amelia and I do on a daily basis. We go through a lot of different scenarios, and they really kind of look to our team for some guidance. So, that's sort of the role that we've shifted into right now. If we move on to 2021, on a good note, we have seen an uptick of contracts come through. We've had 11 events come through over the last 2 months. 10 of those 11 events are successful reschedules. So I think that's a great sign that people are still willing to come back and sign those contracts and get rolling. A lot of these events have some healthy hotel rooms, which I'm sure will make everyone around this table, including myself, very happy. And there's some pretty good events, some large people attendance-wise, and some great events to get back on the calendar. With that being said, we have had 7 events total cancel for 2021 already. 6 of those events are people that had contracts and have decided not to move forward. And I do have the split for you right there. 3 public shows, 1 social, 1 convention, and 2 meetings. That does come with a total of 11 event days. We still have 3 contracts, though, out there from people that are still going back and forth with language, trying to make sure their contracts are solid for their reschedule for 2021. But that brings our numbers to 47, 86 event days, 28,293 hotel rooms, 28,293 guests, and 7,174 hotel rooms. On another great note, we still have 23 contracts out there for 2021, which is whenever we're over 20, that's a great number. Contract process obviously has changed for us a little bit. We've had to develop some new policies and procedures to not only protect ourselves, but to protect the clients. The approval process has changed for getting events approved, and Doug has tirelessly worked on, making this process as smooth as possible for our clients. So, the contract process has slowed down a little bit, but it is still streamlined as much as we can make it. So that has been helpful. But, everyone around this table knows me. I like to highlight some of the positive sides of things, so I will end with that. I want to make sure that people know that we are very actively still touring people through the facility. The points made earlier about how, we're kind of looking at where we were a few years ago, opening the building and touring people through, that's pretty much what we're doing again today. People want to know what this sort of setup around this table looks like. They want to know what sort of capabilities we have. They want to know what it's going to look like when they have to change their meetings. The hybrid model is not going anywhere anytime soon, and a lot of people need some education and some help on what that's all going to look like and what our facility is capable of. So, we've had 14 additional tours over the last 2 months, which is wonderful. People are coming to our facility in person and, staying safe and walking around and asking questions. We've also had a total of 5 groups reach out for 2022 and 2023 dates, which I think is a wonderful sign as well. Some groups, I think, are taking a break for a couple of years, but are looking to kind of get past this COVID era and plan for their future. So that's always great. And I will end with, we got a wonderful lead from our ASM family. It's the New York State Miss Teen and USA pageant. They've been in Westchester for many, many years, and it's time for them to look for a new location. So we successfully brought them up 2 weeks ago. They toured our facility, the Empire State Plaza, and the Palace. We showed them all Albany had to offer, including the Renaissance Hotel. They had a wonderful time, and we're in the process of working through what's going to work for them. So, and that's a piece of 2021 business, and it's brand new. So it's always what we're all eager for.
Pretty cool.
What month and how far into 2021?
They're currently looking in May or June. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. That was sobering, but very uplifting, because that's the way you roll.
I'd like to just second that, Shannon. We've always appreciated your positive comments, but especially now. Thank you for that.
A quick question,
Yes.
and forgive me for not knowing, have we updated our marketing materials to emphasize our compliance, our safety?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've done quite a bit, actually. We actually have a COVID resource page on our website. So pretty much every document that we start to update or update is located there. All of our marketing materials are reflective of the times. So we have one specifically to the cleaning, one specifically to our venue shield, one specifically to production, and working with our audiovisual team on a production room and things like that. So yes, all of our materials have been updated.
I'm not getting the sense that that's being translated on our social media marketing. So can I encourage that if we need to create some more for that platform, maybe we should?
Yep, no problem. I appreciate the feedback, and
Thank
we'll
you
let our
so
marketing
much.
team know. Yep.
I don't know if this question's for Shannon or Doug, but so what's it like when we've had some events here? What's the food like? Like, look at me, you can tell food is a major important part. What's the experience like? Is it all boxed lunches, or are they serving meals, or what have they been doing so far? How's Mazzone recalculating?
Yeah, so what I like to say is in today's atmosphere, everything is a case-by-case basis. So, it's really a fact-finding mission with the client first for not only food and beverage, but for audiovisual. It's trying to get to what they want their end result to be, and we work back from there. Some clients are very comfortable with putting a buffet out and letting their team, do what they need to do. Some clients work in an office where they're still all together and feel comfortable with the environment that they're in. Some don't. So some have opted for more of that box lunch or box salad or, a lot of different options. But I do think it looks a little different from client to client. And then there's some clients that come in here keeping in mind that some of these virtual events are only for a couple of hours. And they don't even do any food and beverage. They opt to not do anything or just have some coffee or some water. But it does look a little bit different from place to place, but really it's sort of up to the comfort level of the client. That's what we found out anyways. And if the client is comfortable, Mazzone, prepares great stuff, and or they can go to the 10th degree, where they have plexiglass up or have protection or have it served and, all the things covered, or they can have, I won't say a normal setup because a normal setup isn't going to happen, soon, but they have a little bit more of a normal setup where they either serve the buffet or are assisting people. But luckily for us, Mazzone is very, very creative, and they're able to kind of work with whatever scenario they're presented with.
One of the other outcomes of the pandemic is, and I don't know if you're seeing this with the cancellations, there's entities that just are no longer going to exist. So I don't know if is that part of the cancellation, or is it right now mostly, just we're going to wait a couple of years?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, especially in the association world. Associations depend on events to bring in their income and to, really focus what they do for the year and their efforts. We do have some smaller associations that I'm not quite sure if they cannot have their events next year, what will happen to them. I don't think we're at that point yet where they're canceling because their association isn't able to operate anymore, but they're at the point where they're canceling because they probably can't afford to have the events, in some cases, for sure.
Following off of that, I just had a question related to, I was able to catch the hybrid model spot on Spectrum this week, and that was exciting to see and actually be able to see professionals in front of the camera, seeing what a hybrid meeting would look like. And we are definitely hearing from a lot of organizations who are not yet back in their offices. They're working predominantly remotely, but are looking to host, put their toe in the water of starting to get back into a little bit more of a hybrid model. Are you seeing that picking up in traction locally from local organizations looking to use our facilities? We've also seen a lot of less than successful free software platform meetings being run, or people having their cell phones in the middle of a table in a conference room and you can't hear anything. So as those frustration levels start to pick up, are you seeing that translate into local business here using the facilities that you are starting to market in that way?
Yeah, actually, those 7 events that we have are all virtual, using our virtual platform. We did our webinars, kind of introducing ourselves back in June, which seems forever ago. But, this platform here, and, as we pointed out in the Spectrum piece, the technology that we have here, the AV, partnership that we have here allows us to kind of take the worry out of them. The Plug Power group that's downstairs, they have 2,000 people attending on Zoom. So, you talk about the cell phone in the middle of the room or whatever, we have all the backup, for you. And then, of course, just looking around the room and what it takes AV just to do this board meeting and be able to have a live component on it, so folks can listen outside and then have it recorded. There's, we're at an advantage there. And then also the other advantage we have is space. This room, we couldn't do this meeting in the Capitol room that we traditionally do because it doesn't fit to socially distance. So, a couple weeks ago, we did a board meeting for the U.S. Amateur Hockey Association. It was 30 people, and we had to use the room next door, 15,000 square feet for 30 people to meet socially distanced. So that's our model, and that's what we're encouraging. If I just take a moment, Shannon mentioned that we have asked the clients to do Plan A, B, and C. We're kind of developing those plans for them. Everybody who signs a contract has to present a COVID plan to us for approval before we will even sign a contract. We tell them what our facility rules are, what New York State's facility rules are, and then we help them navigate the guidelines to make sure that it's safe. So that's the one thing we do. And then we've also built the relationships with our vendors to ease those. We have secured,
Does that plan become part of the contract then?
yes, it's exhibit, I think it's Exhibit A or B in the contract, so it's actually a written document.
Thank you.
We have established with Shepherd Security, thermal scanning for temperatures. It also has facial recognition. Everybody can input their information from their phone, and then and then they take a selfie, and it gets uploaded to the system. So every time they take their temperature, we know who it is, what time they came in, and obviously what their temperature is. So we have that available now to our clients. We have also worked with Mike Bighouse, who is our medical director at the Times Union Center for ASM Global, who oversees our EMS department, and we are expanding the footprint of operating the EMS department from the Times Union Center to include this building as well. So using our shared services, again, having, medical personnel and having those folks here, again, more options for our clients.
I may add, what has changed is the rubric upon which their revenue is based. And just as Mr. Hoffman pointed out before, that you have the colliding issues of rate and occupancy when dealing with hotel rooms, we also have the issue of event days, which preclude us perhaps from renting the facility to multiple clients as originally designed. We're also dealing with the types of events and the change, and how do you predict the profit for that? You can't use the former rubric because of, as Mr. McDonald pointed out, the whole food and beverage thing has changed tremendously. So perhaps yielding to Shannon or to Doug, maybe you want to explain a little bit about that as well, where we used to count on a number of event days or a number of events per year. Each event is differently calculated. It doesn't return the same investment or the same profit perhaps as could be predicted in the past, because all these other things are changing.
Yeah, the cost of business has obviously increased, and, our model here is not, we can't expect the client to accept all of those charges and still be able to do business. So our model has changed, and I think part of that and what we're doing and working with catering on our contract renewal with Mazzone, and what we did when we went out to RFP for our catering, or our audiovisual services, is the commissions and the budget and what is charged to the client and what's their cost of doing businesses. We're doing our best to keep it level, and then us realizing other avenues for revenues so that we can, still turn a profit. And as you see, in August, and we laughed, we only had a few events, but we actually did better with, what was budgeted, just, a little bit better, but it was better nonetheless. And it was, actually realizing revenues that we could, maybe there weren't there, or, with the skeleton staff that we do have working, we're able to minimize expenses, which is really the key part, and then not passing those costs on to the client.
Yeah, I noticed that. I picked it up in one of the financial reports, and I think we're going to see that throughout the year. To Sarah's point, we're going to see AV become more of a profit center, not equal to, but certainly, and we need to be cognizant of that, and as we get more comfortable with it, plan for it as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then, just John, going back to yours, with, the catering that we have seen now, everything is prepackaged. They're all boxed lunches, packaged snacks, packaged cookies. There is an attendant who is overseeing the, nothing is just laid out on the table. Everything's handed to them, minimizing touch points. So I think, again, it's all, how we're doing the business, and then keeping costs down, but still being able to hold a successful event.
Other discussions about operations or sales or marketing?
I'll just add one more thing. October 14th is when the NCAA makes their announcements on the next round of championships in 2023 through 2026. As you know, we have over 18 different proposals out for different championships between here and the Times Union Center. So hopefully at the next board meeting, we'll be able to report on some future business on the NCAAs.
Can I ask about that for a second? So we've put in our proposals. Have we amended them based on comparisons to what New York is doing today versus what maybe some of our competition is doing today as it relates to the pandemic?
Yes, exactly, yes. So we have actually a call, the destination does have the women's basketball in 2021. Obviously, at this point, we don't know if there's fans, if it's limited fans. We have a call with them on October 7th to discuss the future of what's happening in New York, what we're doing, and, budgets revised and how we are able to do that. And then they have also asked for in the future bids in 23, not knowing what 23 looks like, but how New York has positioned themselves.
You've also prepared, Doug, I understand, for the possibility of having a bubble here as well.
Yeah, we had a couple of different conversations. The bubble is one of those COVID buzzwords. We had early conversations with the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, who was going to work with the America East on a large bubble. That plan is not happening, and there's still some discussions about a potential bubble with Siena College. As you know, the MAC has announced that their season has started, their conference schedule has started, and they have a week in November that the NCAA is permitted for non-conference. So they're exploring their non-conference schedule on most likely without fans, pending on where it is, but that is a potential. We also had another inquiry from Brian in Stratton, who is looking for a home because now a lot of the college facilities aren't allowing third parties into their facilities that they traditionally would rent for the the COVID plan, so to not expose their athletes with incoming athletes. So that was one, and then there was also another professional sports bubble that we got an inquiry with that Discover Albany did just 2 days ago, and we had just started diving into that one. So I think, again, there's some different potentials there if we can navigate through them.
And if these are basketball bubbles, we would be used for food and beverage?
Well, without fans, we would actually have games too. So we would do food and beverage, and we would have a court set up here for competition. So it would be between here and the Times Union Center. I don't believe that one at this point is going to be viable. I just think the schools
I just meant overall. I mean, we would, all I'm trying to say is this facility would be in use during any of those bubble events.
Yes, absolutely, yes. So the basketball one, we would have done food and beverage and competition. And then there's a second one, which would be hockey, and we would be food and beverage.
And that food and beverage could include 3 meals a day because of the way the quarantine's set up. But in answering your question, Mr. Abito, we are using not only what is in New York, but also as examples elsewhere. For instance, the NBA bubble, et cetera. What are the practices? What are the mistakes made? For instance, what are the lessons learned to make this site available as well?
I just think if a potential client is looking for the safest site going forward, I don't know how many compare to New York with where we are on infection rates, how the trajectory is. So while it's terrible that we have to use it as a marketing tool, I think it's an extraordinary good one, at least over the next year or so.
And Doug, you talked about services a little bit. We're pretty well set with making sure that vendors, and I'm looking at ACE's staff over there, I know they're in place, that everything is in place?
Yeah, so ACES is done. We have IT, public relations that are going out to RFP, and we are talking with Mazzone Hospitality on their catering contract as well. All of our contracts had mirrored the ASM operating, which expires at the end of this year, so now we're getting those all buttoned up here so that we don't miss a beat.
Duncan, did you want to bring up that the fact that you and Doug have been talking about sharing some of those marketing services that would affect our budget?
We have ended the relationship with Gramercy that was a month-to-month. Originally, it was a one-year contract, and it was extended month-to-month. And in going out to an RFP for public relations and representation services, we saw an opportunity for shared services by piggybacking with ASM. because all of our efforts have been in support of the facility. They haven't been necessarily independent. It's proven over time that the ACCA doesn't seem to need a separate representation. We don't lobby. We're not participating in that. But in terms of making sure information gets out on social media platforms, taking advantage of the Spectrum piece that you had mentioned, Ms. Reginelli, and others, we saw an opportunity to share that service, not unlike the other $750,000 worth of services on an annual basis that are shared with the Times Union Center.
So, I'm sorry, is that proposal out? So we put the RFP out for shared services or an option to submit for shared services?
So the public relations expires at the end of the year. It'll go out to bid in mid-October.
October,
And it'll include both the authority's messaging and the Capital Center's messaging.
So it's one proposal, one contract?
You mentioned the Times Union Center.
The Times Union...
That's why I'm asking.
Okay, yeah, the Times Union Center shared agreement is the employees that is agreed upon with our contract on an annual basis for review between both the county and the authority.
But I'm talking for public relations services. That's what I thought you were talking about.
Public relations does not include the Times Union Center.
Any further discussion? If not, we'll turn to Bob. You have anything?
Yeah, I'd like to just provide an update. As you recall, at the last meeting, this board approved an amendment and extension of the ASM operator agreement to commence January 1, subject to, sign off by ESD with respect to the tax implications. And that has been submitted to ESD, and we're just waiting for their feedback. But the contract is in order, and it's ready to be executed by both parties once we have the sign-off.
That's an ESD, it doesn't have to be authorized, but it's a review by ESD, is that correct?
Yes, it's basically submitted to ESD for an informal review just to focus on the tax-exempt financing aspect of the language, because it's a qualified management contract under the Internal Revenue Code. And in previous years, the state of New York has issued tax-exempt financing to sort of backfill the grant money that they use to budget for this facility. So the authority, we'd have to provide a certification as to the use of the facility, that it's in compliance with the Internal Revenue Code requirements. So, we submitted it to ESD because usually ESD's Bonds Council is the one that will ask us for those certifications.
Thank you.
Are we waiting long for a response?
I believe you submitted in August.
August.
Yeah, I think we submitted in August.
If it's not a requirement, do we put a deadline date that we accept it as per a certain date? I don't want to wait forever on something that's generally innocuous.
We do have the authority to move forward and execute this. So we can do that. We could establish our own time frame, and to say if we don't hear back by a certain time frame, we can go ahead and it was more of a courtesy to the state.
We've already approved it, so.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to shut it down. I don't know when you're going to hear back from them.
Okay.
And I don't want it to be, I don't want the reputation of the business functions here to be clouded by the business functions there, maybe.
Understood.
Not quite the same ESD as it used to be, Robert.
Just before we move into executive session?
There were two other items under the operations, and just for your information, the next, within tab 5, there is a draft schedule of meetings for 2021. So if you could check your calendars, and then perhaps by the next meeting we could be prepared to set that calendar. And then...
It's in the back of the sales report here.
Yeah, it's under tab 5. It's the second item. It's behind the sales and marketing report. And then the last item is the internal board contact information, which had been submitted before, and all changes, corrections made. That's updated for your use.
Okay, so our next full board meeting then is the 29th of October.
That's correct.
All right, if there's no other discussion, and I do want to go into a brief, an executive session, can I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, John. Second?
Second.
Thank you.